pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a busy schedule tonight. First of all, we have the approval of the agenda, and basically we're covering two information and discussion items, one new business item. We have a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. We can move on to item 3, information and discussion, and we'll turn this over to Dr. Tuttle.
Thank you, Vice President Ismail. So thanks for being here this on a beautiful day. I'm just going to go over the millages, both our sinking fund and our operating fund, give you information, and I hope our objective to this evening is for you to gather information, ask any questions that you may have. This same presentation will be presented to the Board of Education and Community on May 28th. So if there's anything that we need to tweak between now and then, this would be the time I'd like to do so. Before I do, I will let you know that I've operated many sinking fund and operating millage elections in my career, but I've never been a hold harmless district, which Grosse Pointe is part of, which many of you know, and I don't want to demean anybody's intelligence, but when Governor Engler and Prop 8 came in, obviously there were some districts that were hold harmless that actually generate more funds for your FTE or your state aid payment per student than the basic foundation. So I come from a basic foundation district. Grosse Pointe obviously generates a lot more, so I'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to make sure that you understand that there are two millages, so each one of them is complex in their own right, and so we're going to separate the two today. First I'm going to talk about the operating millage, which will be on the ballot in August. What? Which will be on the ballot in August, and then subsequently the sinking fund millage, which will be on the ballot in November. The agenda today, as I just said, operating millage, sinking fund millage, I'm going to explain to you, and I don't mean to demean anyone's intelligence, so I apologize if you know all this, but the difference between a bond debt and a sinking fund debt, the review of the 2022 10-year capital plan that Grosse Pointe did, which is a really nice review, campaign finance do's and don'ts, Q&A. This is very small, but I think it's prudent that I spend some time on why millages in general. This is a pretty special community, but regardless, the first statement applies to all public schools. Public schools play a critical role in the social, economic, and cultural vitality of the community, making them an integral part of its fabric. As such, it is important for school leaders to inform the community about ways to sustain and enhance these valuable assets. In Michigan, the responsibility for addressing capital needs often falls to local taxpayers through school district millages. That's different from a lot of states that provide capital project funds to schools. The second part is something that I put in there that I think pertains to Grosse Pointe uniquely, perhaps some other districts similar to Grosse Pointe, but tradition costs money. And what I mean by that is maintaining traditions and operating stately facilities can be quite costly, and that's how I would describe our facilities in Grosse Pointe. The upkeep of these prestigious sites often involves significant financial investment due to the need for regular maintenance, updates to comply with modern standards, ADA compliance, etc., and the inherent inefficiencies compared to newer, more advanced facilities. Additionally, the commitment to preserving traditional practices may also entail expenses that more contemporary methods might mitigate. However, these facilities and traditions are what set Grosse Pointe apart, highlighting its unique charm and historical significance. Grosse Pointe is one of the, I see a air point already, is one of those rare places that draws generation upon generation back to raise their own children in a community where schools have continued traditions while keeping up with the times. How many of you fit in that generational families? So you can attest to that. So the purpose of today's presentation is to inform, educate, and provide clarity on the upcoming millages. Definitions, again, not to demean your intelligence, I'm not going to go through all of these, but most of you know. 1 mil is a tax unit equal to $1 per $1,000 in taxable value. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and give you some examples. Property cash value is the established value of a property. SUV is roughly 50% of the property's true cash value, also known as taxable value. Homestead versus non-homestead. A property that a taxpayer would classify as a primary residence, and this is important when we're talking about operating millages, so please keep this in mind. versus a non-homestead property that is not a primary residence, typically commercial or vacation homes. And a foundation allowance I alluded to before is after Prop A, a per pupil amount the state authorizes in primary funds for school operating. Just to give you an idea, I talked about the basic foundation versus what Grosse Pointe collects per student. Basic foundation right now is $9,849. That's what the majority of districts collect per pupil. Grosse Pointe collects $11,303 per pupil. An operating millage is a tax levied on properties to fund the daily operations of the district. Converse to a sinking fund that I'm going to talk to in a minute, but let's stay focused on operating. Operating funds can be used for anything: salaries, maintenance, anything that we want, books, furniture. You're going to hear me talking sinking funds. You cannot utilize those funds in the same regard. The state assumes that we are levying a full 18 mills on non-homestead properties, and what I mean by that is if you don't levy that, you don't get your full state aid. And for Grosse Pointe, you're going to find out in a minute that equates to $22.5 million. I don't think we've ever not had an operating millage. Typically, operating millages pass pretty consistently. And for Grosse Pointe, this is the non-homestead part that I talked about. This can levy up to 7.5337 mills on homestead properties, which are your residential homes. And as I just indicated, the impact if this were to fail to the district is a revenue loss of $22.4 million. I'm going to stop there. Any questions on that so far? I'm cruising, so I assume yes.
Is it fair to say that the proposal as included in the materials is an extension and not in any way an increase?
That is correct, and it says that in a moment in the ballot language as well, but yes, you are correct in that. And here you go. No tax increases for homeowners. It's a continuation of funding, ensures Grosse Pointe can maintain its current operations without interruption. No tax increase for homeowners, and support for programs that funds, maintains, and improve educational programming, staffing, and resources. Again, I'm going to delineate that for the sinking fund, which had very specific utilizations.
Maybe in the technology fund.
Let me just see, maybe I just need to click
Yeah, it's like
past it.
skipping over that one specifically.
Just plan that one.
Alright,
Give it a sec.
can you be patient? Not my hurt you. Jeopardy music?
You do great.
Hold on.
I know you're pitching for part of the sinking fund. Let's go.
Anyone have any great stories while we wait?
You have a good trivia question.
Oh yes, I do. Here's a good trivia question. I hope this is accurate. I'll clarify. But what two schools in Michigan offer more athletic opportunities than Grosse Pointe? Think about that. I'll tell you later. That'll be. You can sit on that for a minute. Operating millage information. There's a FAQ. You want to open that? That's what. Yep. We have a comprehensive FAQ. I'm not necessarily going to go through all of those. I kind of shared that, but this is something that we would send as literature to all voters, which answers the majority of questions, when to vote, and it's also inclusive of the actual language as it would appear on the ballot.
And I do have the ballot language.
Do we have the FAQ copies or no?
No, I did not print them out because we're still at finalized draft right now. We just need our attorney to finalize some of those responses.
Thank you.
So I'm not going to read this to you, but I will tell you that something that you need to understand is a district can levy no more than 18 mills. So you see that we're asking for 20 mills. Why? Because that provides a cushion if there were to be a heavily rollback. And so heavily rollback is what happens to your 18 mills. It gets rolled back if your taxable value in your community of your homes exceeds inflation. So ours has already been rolled back. I don't know what we're sitting at right now, but as I indicated before, the state assumes you're collecting your full 18 mills. So if you're only collecting 17.5, you're actually losing revenue. So that's why you put a cushion on. So when a rollback occurs, your starting point is at 20 mills. So if you have a rollback of 0.5, now you're at 19.5, but you still can only collect 18. That's the max you can collect. So you ask for a little bit more, and that's why the board chose to go with 20 mills, So it protects us from any rollback that may happen in the next 5 years and allows us to continue to collect, generate the 18 mils.
I have a question, so what happens if there wouldn't be a rollback? What happens to that extra money?
There is no extra money. You can only levy 18 mils.
Okay,
You always can only levy 18 mils.
but aren't you assuming that there's a rollback in that? Like, what happens if there's not a rollback?
Then you just levy 18 mils.
Okay.
I don't know if I
No,
answered
that
your
answers the
Okay.
question, yes.
So if there's a rollback, you actually have 2 mil cushion. So if there's a rollback in year 1 of 0.5, subsequently there's another rollback in year 3 of another 0.5, you still are levying your full 18 mils. If for some reason taxable value skyrockets, so you get a rollback of 2.5, now you're below your 18 mils and you're only levying 17.5, and you lose revenue from the state at that juncture.
So to that point, given the state of the residential real estate market, no supply, all that kind of stuff, do you think that's a sufficient cushion for 5 years?
I think so. Yeah, I think that we talked to our financial managers who have said that that is a pretty substantial cushion. The last year we had 19 mils on a 5-year, and I think throughout it all we rolled back maybe 0.5.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah, that's what was recommended to the board. There is never a roll up, and what I mean by that is if your taxable values crash, you can't roll back up, which is unfortunate, but sure.
So,
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
so the 22.4 estimate, that's at 18 mils
Correct.
on last year's taxable value?
That is on this year's taxable value.
Okay.
Yep.
So how
And
much,
it's assuming that, like I said, we've been rolled back, so it's assuming that we collect the full 18 mils again. So we restore the 18 mils.
all right, so next year, what would we be rolled back to if we did not put that cushion in this?
I think, I want to say it was something like close to 17.5. I think we're at about 17.5 right now. So we start there, and then we actually would assume another rollback this year, which Carrie Blanchett from PFM, actually Amanda Van Dusen from Miller Canfield shared with us. Do you remember what that amount was? It was maybe another 0.5. So we are down from one.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And that, so the 22.4, do you know how much we collected this past year? It was some number probably less than 22.4.
It was about 20.
20, okay.
And I actually have a slide that'll show you how we get to 22.5. The commercial versus the full harmless. Sum total of both of those gets you 22.5.
So there's absolutely no reason not to build in a cushion. Like, that would be, it
You
would
would-
actually be the other way,
Right.
it'd be a huge mistake.
It'd be a huge mistake not to build in a cushion. That is a true statement. Any other questions before I move on? The letter from the superintendent, I don't think you need to, I'm saying all of that. We will have information on our website. The Q&A will eventually be up there once we've had it vetted through the attorneys to ensure that we're not saying anything inaccurately or anything that we can't, because you're going to see in the campaign finance laws that district employees cannot advocate on how people can vote. So everything that we post, that we utilize district, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, so I don't want to be redundant, but anything that we use district equipment, district time, we cannot advocate how to vote. All we can do is educate. You as community members can do whatever you want. Arguably, staff members on their own personal time can do whatever they want on their own personal sites with their own personal devices. Can't use district paper. Anything that the district pays for, you cannot use to advocate a particular way. So this will be up. I think I gotta go back before I can click. Yeah? Do I? Can you click on the Q&A? We already went through that, so I'm not gonna go through that. So that's the operating millage. To me, that's the easier one to educate on. Every district has to ask for it. You can go up to 20 years. The board decided to go for 5, which is what we've done in the past. They decided to embed the 2 cushion mill in it. The 18 mils is standard. So any questions about that? Yes.
So, just so I understand, so we collected about 20 last year. If it was 18, you didn't put the cushion in, we'd probably still collect 22.4 this year or thereabouts.
Well, this year, the current millage extends through the December 2025 collection.
Oh, okay, all right, so we would still be under the 17.5 mils till 2025 because of the rollback that we're under right now.
You are correct. So we collect in December. We have one more collection in both sinking fund and operating mills that is on last year's election time. So whatever, and I don't know definitively, so I think it's about 17.5, I don't know that definitively. But whatever it is, right now is what we collect in December. And schools always collect taxes, whether it be sinking fund, operating millage, one time a year, which is December. So we have one more collection.
So this would take effect in 2025.
Correct.
December.
And then if we didn't have the cushion in, it would still grow, but if our taxable value increased higher than inflation, we'd be rolled back. And we'd
Correct.
only be able to collect at the rate of inflation.
Correct.
So the
That's
cushion
correct.
the cushion doesn't keep it level, it just keeps it so if our taxable values go higher than the rate of inflation, we would collect the excess.
100%, got it. I do have, if, I didn't make copies, but we can here, I do have a full fact sheet on how Headley rollbacks work if anyone's interested in that, so, yeah. That's a great question. So we just want to maintain 18 mils, that's basically what we want to do, because the state assumes you do it, you maintain that, and that's what allows us to get to the 11,303 per student that we generate.
So, as far as elevator language goes, what's a good sentence to explain what we're doing here?
I don't know what you mean by elevator language, so.
In other words, you gotta,
Elevator speech?
yeah, elevator speech as far as, okay, people ask, well, what is this operating thing all around, about? You know, what's a good sentence to give people, say, well, we're just maintaining,
Yeah, we're
basically.
maintaining the operation of our district. And I don't know, I guess I don't really understand what.
Not a new tax.
It's not a new
It's not a new
tax.
tax.
It's not an
operating
increase in
our district.
taxes.
Right.
We want to fully fund and benefit from the
Just
state.
maintaining what we have.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one thing I will say, the way it's written, it is asking for 20 mils, not 18. So someone who does not know about the rollback issue would perceive that as a 2 mil increase, perhaps.
And that's kind of where education comes in, but you're correct in that, but it says we can collect, can you go back to the ballot?
Yeah,
language for a
But you
moment?
can't write it a different way.
The first
Right.
sentence says.
You can't, if you put in 18, you're gonna, you
Right.
can't say,
It
hey,
says
we're
we
just
can
putting in
collect
20 for a
18.
cushion.
I understand.
Right, so it's the education part, right?
Play devil's advocate here.
The last time I think it read 19, there was a cushion of 1 mil.
2019.
But with the tax,
19.
but with the taxable values in Grosse Pointe and going up at a pretty steady, they recommended, and when I say they, Miller Canfield, because they do a lot of these, recommended a 2 mil cushion. So, again, it says, tax over that in the Grosse Pointe to be increased by 20 mils to the extent such property tax is statutory exempt from 5. Is that what it says?
Dr. Tuttle, the first sentence says something about 18.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're missing part of it.
If you go up,
This is the,
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
so this is the explanation at the top, and then the question is
Yeah.
the second paragraph.
So which part would be on the ballot? Would the italics be on the ballot as well?
it's a good question.
Yeah, this is exactly what was shared with us.
This
The
is how,
copy that you have is what will be on the ballot.
this is what we submitted to Wayne County. But,
Okay,
but I'm gonna clarify that, because the explanation piece, I wanna make sure that that's your question, is the explanation piece gonna be
Yes.
about? It traditionally is, but again, Wayne County's a little bit different, but this is what we were provided from our attorney, so I presume it is, but that, I don't want to assume incorrectly, so we'll ask that and get back with the group. Good question. Other questions before we get off operating millage? So again, we roughly generate about $100 million in revenue. That's with all the grants included. It's about 75 without grants. About 100 million, and of that, 22 million comes from your operating millage. So that's a significant loss, roughly just shy of a fourth of your budget for operating, our budget for operating. All right?
The other thing is, this passed with 70% last time, right?
It is.
Tell them that
71.
too.
They both,
Yeah, 71%.
a year after the bond, so something to consider.
All right, we can go back. Now we're going on to thinking fund. So, any other questions before we leave operating? Because I don't want you to smash the two. They're very distinct millages.
The green flyer, is that the flyer that is gonna be used?
The Q&A flyer.
The one that says restore, enhance, renew?
Is that the Q&A?
Yeah, we just had a little blurb in there.
I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, Alexa has been working on that.
Yeah.
And that is on our August ballot, this one will be on our.
Yes, this is the November ballot.
Yes.
So, yeah. So we're still working on the literature, so, and I'm gonna tell you this in a moment, but absentee ballots go out in the third week in June, so all this literature has to be to our absentee voters prior to the third week in June, so that's why we're in a little bit of a crunch. I mean, bluntly, I've told the board this, we should have probably been working on this way before now, so we're in a little bit of a,
Is that for
We gotta
both
go.
or just the operating?
what, is what?
June?
Just operating.
Just
Just the
operating.
operating, yep, just the operating. Any questions before I go to sinking funds? This is a little more complex. All right, so sinking fund is a tax specifically for building and site improvements, not for general operational expenses. This is how I used to explain it to people. When sinking funds first became a thing, if you were to cut off the roof of a building, so envision that, and turn it over and shake it out, anything that fell out of the building could not be used with sinking fund dollars. You would all fall out, so all of our teachers would fall out, all of our educational teams, these tables would fall out, that camera would fall out, everything, okay? What wouldn't fall out? Your floors, your windows, if the roof was still on, it wouldn't fall out. Inset cabinets like this wouldn't fall out. So that's what sinking funds can be used for. They cannot be used for salaries, benefits, they cannot be used for people. That is a big misnomer that I want to make sure people understand. The difference between a bond and a sinking fund, a bond is like a mortgage on a house. You mortgage it, you pay interest on it. A sinking fund, differently from a mortgage or a bond, is you collect the funds, you collect $5, you get to spend $5. You collect $1,000, you get to spend $1,000. So formally, a bond is a form of borrowing, and taxpayers must pay back the borrowed funds over a period of years with interest, like a mortgage. Sinking funds are levied, but are not borrowed. This means the funds generated do not include borrowing additional debt or incurring interest. The proposed levy is for 3 mills, which is $3 and $1,000 of taxable interest. And I'm going to explain to you how that works formula-wise so that you can help people understand. If they say, what does it mean to me? I'm going to show you that in a slide. The duration decided by the board was 10 years, so from 2025 to 2034, the district would collect 3 mills, which generates 1 mill right now, generates about $3.4 million. Okay, so you multiply that by 3 mills, you're roughly up to $10.2 million. And you're going to see in a minute why that is so necessary, because the needs are about $252 million. I'm going to show you that in a minute as well. Again, the use of the funds, I can't reiterate this enough, construction, repair of buildings, site improvements, school security, which is huge. A lot of sinking fund dollars go to school security. Technology upgrades, which was added. So when I said shake out the building, that was the original one. Since then, the legislators have added technology upgrades to be used for sinking fund dollars. And then subsequently to that, so this is where we are, that we can use technology upgrades. Since then, if this one passes, and why it's not a pure renewal, because we're adding mills, plus we're adding the new language, transportation vehicles can be taken out of sinking fund dollars. Yes.
Is it true that when the last one was passed at 1 mil, neither technology, security, nor transportation could be
No.
appropriate usages?
When your last one passed, in Grosse Pointe, technology was and security could be. What couldn't be was the transportation. That's the added
That's the
component.
one.
Yep, this is the added component. So any monies that are levied in this December, this is from last sinking fund, those monies have to be separated and can only be used for site improvement, school security, and technology upgrades. Anything subsequent, so in 2025 in December, you can add transportation vehicles to that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
At one time, back when I was a kid, sinking fund you could not use for, let's take a parking lot. If we were tearing out the parking lot and replacing it, it had to be a bond. And if you were going to repair it, you could use sinking fund. Is that still correct?
I don't think that's accurate, but we can
Okay.
certainly check on that. I've done a lot of, in my past, a lot of parking lot projects using sinking funds, so. I
Okay,
don't think that's accurate, but I don't know.
okay.
What was the front of, maybe you don't know, the front of Ronell?
'Cause we had some issues where we actually tore it out because we wanted to use certain money. It was like a borderline thing, it was
Yeah.
very close. And we ended up taking it down to the
Okay.
bones.
I don't know, is anyone else super hot in this room, or is it just me?
Yeah, there's no air movement.
Yeah, any of the windows open, anything? Come on, technology, isn't this like
Yeah,
HVAC?
technology's
Yeah.
gonna totally
There
do
air
it.
conditioning in
We got
this
the
one?
facilities guy.
Anyway, sorry.
So,
Ben's working on it.
so on that like fungibility of funds question, let's say you had X $1 million for transportation in the current operating budget, could that be redeployed elsewhere?
Yes,
Like,
100% correct. So now our operating budget pays for about 1.6 million in transportation, which you would say, how is that possible? We're not even a busing district. But that's because of all the special education buses that you see, as well as, because we contract through Auxilio, that does all of our transportation, but our buses say Grosse Pointe on them, which is interesting to me as well. And then on top of that, it's all the extracurriculars that we take. But to your point, you're absolutely right. It would free up some money in the general fund if you could utilize sinking fund dollars for that, if you chose to do that, yes. That feels good, at least there's the air
Trying
flow.
to be quiet
Thank
too,
you,
sorry.
that's okay. Good question.
Joe, at one point, we used to have in our general fund budget, 2 million or so for construction repairs.
Yeah.
You know, that's been sucked up by other overhead, you know, so that's why the sinking fund's so important.
All right, moving on. Okay. Facility improvements, uses of sinking funds, I've kind of just talked about these. I do want to go, so I'm not going to reiterate those, but let's go to the 22 10-year capital plan. This document is how many pages?
197.
So we're not going through 197 pages, you're welcome. But I do want to point out a couple highlights. So first of all, I want to commend the Board of Education for having this completed, because this is a huge start. But remember, this is in 2022. Typically, projects don't typically fall off the list. People think if you improve a parking lot, will stay on parking lots, that, oh, it's good for life. They don't realize everything has a shelf life. Well, it's a roof, a parking lot. You have to continually maintain your facilities. I wanted to show this. This is every building, and it's, let's just use defer because they're at the top. So you have, and Plant Moran did this for us, for the district. So what they did is they took every one of the buildings and they told what are your critical needs, what your deferred maintenance, property enhancement, and then your sum total of needs for that building. And then I'm going to show you a little bit later, I'm just going to use an example of how they broke it down per building. And ultimately, at the end, you're going to hear action items, whether it be from this group or with Plant Moran's assistance, Ben Matteson's assistance. We are going to need to say to the voters, these are the specific uses that we intend to utilize these funds for moving forward. So we're going to showcase what they've been used for, and then tell them what they will be used for. With the notion that you always hold something back in case a boiler goes down or something happens that becomes emergency. So just in critical needs, you're at $173 million. So a little quiz, 3 mils at 3.4 generates roughly how much in a year?
10.2.
10.2. You're doing this for 10 years, so you're going to generate roughly $100 million, whatever, okay? That doesn't even come close. So I know someone said to me, well, there's a lot of fluff in that. Okay, I disagree with that, but let's hypothetically say that there is. There's certainly, even if it's half of this, you still don't cover it. Half of 252 million, we still can't cover it, and that's in 10 years, and that's if we could do everything today and it lasted forever, which doesn't happen. So any questions on this before I show you one sample building, just to show you how it's broken down?
Ben, what would help if you could extract this from Plant Moran is to take something simple that people could relate to, like parking lots or roofs, and say, just to take care of those, we need to reserve this much per year, you know?
It's a good segue.
We got 2 million this year.
Parking lots,
This is
correct.
on T.
So here's an example of Monteith, as denoted up here. So you can see how it's broken down into the envelope, which is what they refer to as the exterior of the building. Windows, I mean, they break it down into replace exterior, curtain wall systems, gym windows, da-da-da-da-da. So it is broken down, and I'm just going to have you scroll through to see.
What's that mark on there?
I don't know, did I do that?
Yeah, that's fine, just a bit. Thanks, Ahmed.
Let me make it I moved
She
it.
touched the screen.
I thought it was a magic marker.
Thank you. All right, but if you scroll down, you can see that this is just Monteith. You can see the extent of just the Monteith projects. My point is, at some point, and this is my recommendation to the board, is we need to create a 5-year plan, and I would say 5 even though this is a 10-year, because things change so readily, of what projects are going to happen in year 1 through 5. And you're going to know that even if you highlight those, there aren't gonna be very many highlights, because things are super expensive. So any questions on that? That document will be available for anyone to see. I think we're not trying to hide any of this, but you can look through it, so.
What's the process that you recommend, Dr. Tuttle, in developing that list?
Well, I think that you need Plant Moran and Ben. I mean, they're the experts. I'm a huge fan of relying on experts. I'm not the expert for what they recommend. And then the board will ultimately have to make the decision, and I would hope that they would follow the recommendation. And I would also hope that you would bank something so that if it doesn't, if something happens that isn't on the list, and people need to understand the list can change in a minute's notice, so it's not carved in stone. This is what we're going to do, but this is our hopes. If everything plays out perfectly, and we don't have a sinkhole in a random parking lot 3 years from now that we didn't know about, and now we have to fix that, then we have to move our money there.
So one observation, because I looked through this actually, in communicating with the voters, the pictures were really helpful.
Yes.
Okay, because like a lot of people haven't been in these buildings in a long time.
Yep. And
Some
so
of
we're
them
gonna,
still look like they did when I went through elementary school, or sure.
I would suspect most of them probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I do have a document, I didn't put it on here, that shows the aging facilities, but yeah, here's some of our buildings. So my goal, and we're kind of going ahead, but the action items, our next step is to create materials that show what has been improved upon, and hopefully, I hope this exists. I think Ben's fairly new, I'm fairly new, we're hoping there's somewhere that someone has documented before and after pictures. In my former district, we did a whole, this is what happened in 2000 when we started the sinking fund. These were all the projects, so we went right from, I don't know when the sinking fund started. In Grosse Pointe.
2020.
Oh, we've only had it since 20.
Well, it was voted in 18, but the first summer was the summer of 2020.
Well, then that should be pretty easy to show the projects.
And they did it
Pointe
every
Moran has
fall.
all
They
that.
did an update every fall that showed the pictures of what was done.
Before and after.
Yeah.
Pointe Moran has all that.
What's curious is that they're showing the future needs, but showing something that would have been, like they showed the Mason boilers. I hope it's not in the 200, that Mason boilers were not in the 252 million. Understanding that there shouldn't be any bond projects in that 200.
Correct. So
52
remember, that's a
million.
2022 document.
Yeah.
And so the document, first and foremost, needs to be cleaned up. Anything that was resolved by the bond or has been resolved in sinking fund should be obviously eliminated. But I'm going to tell you, having experienced
It's
this,
not gonna change the number.
No. You eliminate stuff, and some stuff
Yeah.
gets added that you didn't have on that. I mean, it's constant. It's an ebb and flow of adding, and so it's just really hard to catch up. And I think something that really needs to be hit home, and I'm not going to say percentage-wise, but there are a lot of communities that have torn down old facilities because maintenance on new facilities is much easier. In Owasso, we sat in a building, beautiful facilities, but it was 6 feet of concrete encapsulated our plumbing. So just to get to the plumbing, you got to knock down 6 feet of concrete. That is extraordinarily expensive. So that's why I said the why right at the beginning. I think something that this community is and should be incredibly proud of is our facilities are premier, stately. I think we love that in Grosse Pointe. We love the traditions of that, but there's a cost to that. And if we want to maintain the walk to schools and these beautiful facilities, which ultimately hopefully help with taxable values of your home. I mean, I would argue that your public schools are the fabric of your community, that they understand that. So, questions before I go to the next slide?
So if I recall correctly with the tech bond, which is bond finance, it was 110 million and we ended up paying around 183 million because of the interest costs, right?
So tech bond was 2014, that one did not pass. You're talking about the
110 million.
100
bond, the 2018 bond.
Yeah, what were the interest costs on that?
I don't know that one, I can find that out.
So, but this is
Joe knows that off the top of his head. Come on, Joe, pop that number out.
I thought it was 183 total, so like
Sounds
73
about right.
million or something like
The,
that.
the interest rate environment has changed dramatically and our credit rating has decreased, so neither of those things are positive.
Right, so if anything, if we did these things, we'd have to pay for them somehow. And if we did it via bond, it would be more because of the interest.
And if you do it be a bond for risking more severe building needs because you haven't done anything in the interim.
Yeah, I mean, is it fair that it's probably an and, not an or at some point?
But to the extent that we keep the bond number low, the
Yes.
sinking fund higher, that would be interest costs. And it looks to me that to the point about, constant refresh on these things, so if the 18 one was about 110, and that brought us 4 years, so that's about 28 million a year, and then this works out to about 25 million a year. That's kind of like an ongoing cost, about 25 million a year we should expect that we're gonna need to fund continuously. Is that fair?
At least, I would say at least.
Alright.
Yeah, the last one was 62 in 2002. And then we went, whatever, 16 years before the next one. And in real dollars, it's about the same amount, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. We already talked about this, the revenue generation accountability funds, but just so people will know, will be audited annually to ensure transparency and proper usage, that we're not utilizing those funds for something that's prohibited. Prohibited uses cannot be used for salaries or general operating expenses. I keep saying that because some people, if they don't particularly like a particular teacher, they think, well, I'm not gonna vote for it. So here's an example of if you have neighbors, people that say, well, I wanna know approximately how much 3 mils. I think this is the easiest way to do it. If your house is, you could sell your house for $150,000, and I have several examples, so fill in blank. Your taxable value is roughly, your SCV is roughly half of that. What you do is you cross off the last 3 numbers. That's what I tell people. It's the easiest thing. You're dividing by 1,000. You pay $70 for 1 mil. You multiply that by 3. Your product is $225. That's what you're paying a year in the sinking fund for 3 mils. So go down to the high end of this example. $2 million home, you can sell it for that. Roughly half of that is your taxable value, your SCV. $1,000 is for 1 mil, 3 mils, 3,000. Again, take your last 3 numbers off, that gives you 1 mil. So it's really easy. I find that to be the really easiest way to explain that to people, but all we're really doing is $1 in every $1,000 of taxable value, so you're dividing by 1,000, but that's the same as eliminating those 3 numbers. So when I share this with the community, I guess I'm asking you, are those good example market values for Grosse Pointe? Do you want to add anything, delete anything? Do you think it kind of covers the?
Probably take that first one off, 150, because there's.
Well, somebody said Pepperwood. Somebody said to add that, possibly. Yeah, to add that. Okay. So again, just helping you help us educate. The ballot language. Oh, I wanted to show you this first and foremost. Can you wait just 1 second on that one, Chris? I think this is interesting. So businesses, this is kind of confusing too, and I hope this doesn't. But businesses have to pay your sinking fund on the taxable value of principal property. Oops, touch it again. Our debt mill, which is our bond, is currently at 3.14 mils. And then businesses, as I indicated, have to pay the 18 mils. Now the 18 mils is based on a different taxable value than your property values. Okay, so it's not 18 times, you're not collecting 60 million at 18 times 3.4 mil. That's different. Homeowners are paying your sinking fund, your debt mill, same, but the difference is they're not paying your non-homestead 18 mils, they're paying the whole harmless 3.7 mils, which is what it is today, but the district can collect up to 7.5337 or whatever it is. But this is actually, if you're a homeowner, this is what you're paying. So what is that, 9.84 mils? That's what you're paying for school taxes right now. So if you multiply that times your taxable value, use that formula and multiply it, instead of by 3, you multiply it by 9.84, that gives you what you're paying for school.
So is current 1 or 3 for the sinking fund?
Current is 1, so they're asking for a 2-year, we're asking for a 2-year increase.
So current millage levy is a little confusing there when you put 3 mils for the sinking fund. That would be proposed, right?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
the heading,
sorry.
yes,
My
thank
fault.
you. Yep,
Okay.
no, that's a good
Good
catch
catch.
verbiage, yep, for sure. So we'll change that, thank you. Any questions on that?
For the non-homestead, that also includes rental properties.
Correct. So commercial and rentals, you're absolutely correct, yes. So people will argue, I'll just tell you what the arguments are.
Second one.
Yeah, if you rent, doesn't affect you, but the argument is, they're gonna raise your rent, so. Not necessarily a great argument, either way, but. Okay, anything else on this slide? I don't know, we show it, we not show it, I don't know, I had today when I was showing it to a group, they're like, I have no idea how many mills, I just wanna know if they're gonna go up, down, whatever. Is this worthy to be shown? Do people understand this? I don't know, guess I'm deferring to your thoughts on that.
I think the slide before where it shows the increase of the 3 mills, like what 1 mill versus
This.
3 mill looks like.
Is the second one, sorry,
Yeah.
is the math in the second line right? 3 mil.
Well, something's off.
Oh, it's 450, you're right, yeah, sorry, that's my mistake, sorry. Thank you, Terry, I'm in petition in the group. Yeah, you're right.
I can add I can do.
150 times 3 is not 500, so thank you, yeah. we
But,
need you.
I mean, that's the right view, it's, I don't know if you put another column in there, but you're currently paying, I don't know if you want to put current, that's what you're paying, because you're not paying
Like right here, put
225
current,
more, you're paying,
current proposed.
Like difference, right?
yeah,
You wanna put, we can differentiate that, current proposed,
maybe.
Right, so you would just subtract the 1 mill from, instead of 1 mill, 3 mill, current
like,
proposed.
and maybe you could have a column that says the difference, this is what you're adding,
Make it easy to do.
like do a column the difference,
You will pay an additional,
Yeah,
250. About a difference
the
of
2,000
150.
extra I'm paying for my $2 million home, that's alright. That I don't know.
It's not homestead.
Well, bluntly,
Oh, yeah,
you
that's the
know,
second one.
I always say that, I don't know, I don't even know if it's good to say, but the reality is people whose homes values are less, you know, might be more apt to support it knowing that their families are gonna benefit just as much as the person who's paying. I mean, it's hard to say that, but that's the reality, so. Any questions on that? Okay. Got language?
Kristen,
I do think that one is a little, I would think about removing that slide.
I would
Not the
too.
first one that we were just
This
on,
one?
that one, I think that was great, I think,
This one,
this one,
take it out?
It's gonna create a lot of confusion.
yeah, I agree.
Okay, we'll remove it. Current millage levy removed. All in favor?
Aye.
Here.
The B is the wrong font size, Chris, in businesses.
I mean, most of the people want to see the impact on the state.
We're gonna give it to you to format, Ahmed, how about that?
He's gonna change the font though.
That's the formatting, as long as it's all consistent. Alright, good on that, so we're taking that out.
Yeah.
Do's and don'ts, I'm not going over all of this, okay, because this is primarily directed, I'm gonna show you what, for employees and board members. The moral of the story is that board members and employees, as I indicated right off the bat, cannot use district funds or resources or time, so if you're on the clock, so to speak, to advocate how to vote. We can utilize as much time and resources to educate people about this. Okay, so I just want to differentiate. If you're saying, why doesn't the district say vote no, vote yes? That is why. It's against campaign finance law. You as community members, aside from the board members, and you can do whatever you want personally on your own social media using your own devices and your own time, but everyone else, you can do whatever you want. And typically what happens in these is a PAC will form because they have the most luxury to bring the community together and take the school employees out of it. So I don't know that that'll happen, but that's, and then they can advocate whichever way they choose. Sometimes there's multiple
Well,
things.
Matt, got an assignment.
So again, I don't want to go through all these unless you guys want me to read to you, but I'm going to go basically campaign don'ts. The next steps, and I'm going to tell you that I kind of just brainstormed these. There are 12 of them that I put together in no particular order, and I did it this morning, so I am certainly open to any suggestions that you have. Let me get through all 12, and if you think of something, please write it down because I might say it later. First and foremost, project identification. We need to identify the key projects that will benefit from the sinking fund moving forward. Secondly, community, and that, we already talked about that. Community education, we developed a comprehensive education campaign to inform the community about the importance and impact of the sinking fund. 3, absentee ballots, we need to ensure educational materials are received by residents by the 3rd week of June. We're working on getting all of those names and addresses right now.
Question on 3, that absentee ballot is for the November, goes out in June?
August.
No, this is for the August.
This is
only.
strictly for
This
operating.
is operating.
Yeah, and what I remember today, I spoke with Shore's clerk or whoever does the. So now Michigan for the last number of years has a permanent absentee ballot list. And so that list, once you're on it, you don't have to every election be on it
Right.
again. So we get a list now, and then perhaps a week before the deadline, ask for it again, because people are added to it all the time. But, you know, the lady in the shores is like, our list hasn't changed.
Yeah, the add-ons are
10
minimal.
people, it's a
now.
relatively smaller city, but in the other cities, as the elections approach, people ask for that absentee ballot, and then they're asked the question, do you want to be permanent absentee ballot list? And so then they go on the list for eternity or until they leave the city, so.
For sure, we can answer a couple times. So let me run through all 12 of these quickly. So literature distribution, send informative literature to all voters. This is not just, so now and we probably wouldn't do this necessarily in June, because if you're not voting until August, and I think it might be a little early for the other voters, but we need to get that list. Showcase past achievements, and you do that, highlight how funds have been successfully used in the past. So what I've done in my previous district, we had a huge, cardboard, that's not the word, corrugated boards, so whatever, something that withstands the rain outside of every school that shows specifically what was done at Defer, at South, at North, so parents, community members walking in can see. As I shared with the group today, we always delineated sexy projects versus not sexy projects. And what I mean by that is sexy is something that the community can see. They can see a parking lot, they can see a roof. They can't see the money that you pour into the tunnels underneath these. So you try to balance those so that the community knows, the community wants to see what you're doing with their money. So you try to balance those projects a little bit. So something to consider when you're doing number 1. Again, I think I just said that, showcase past achievements, and we would do that in social media, we'll do that in all of our literature that comes out. You know, I hope that if we can find the list that says what we did in 2020, 2021, and so forth, we would do that as well. Number 6. Oh, me, sorry. I know, formatting off. Future fund utilization, clearly outline plans for future. I think that's redundant actually. Social media engagement, maintain an active social media presence to reach a broader audience and keep the community informed. Community presentations. This is the take the show on the road thing, which I would love to have your help in that, whether you go to Rotary or Chamber of Commerce, wherever it is, and present this. The more people that can be out talking about it. Sometimes people don't want to hear necessarily from the superintendent, they want to hear from their friends. I just talked about that actually, the school board displays, place boards outside every school, the database activation. So this is the best way I find, I call it the Amway effect. Like Ben identifies 10 of his friends, and this is where someone's willing to help that's really great at technology, outside of Chris. Then Ben identifies 10, Colleen identifies 10, Chris. So I'm just going to use them as an example. Then each of their 10 go out and identify 10 people that they can educate. Then on election day, you call your 10, and ask them to call their 10 and make sure everybody gets out and vote. August is a little bit challenging because a lot of people are on vacation. But there's also cross-reference in that database. So let's say Chris and Ben and Colleen all put me on the list. I don't want 3 phone calls. So someone would be able to cross-reference and only make sure that I'm on your list. You need to find a 10th friend, sorry for the luck. So, all right, so that's a database activation if we choose to do that. Again, that's typically community generated. Community letters, if you can get people that will write letters, one way or the other, educating regarding the sinking fund, community members can advocate one way or the other. Voting participation, as I just indicated, and encourage and ensure the community remembers. I should say remembers, not members. I was getting short. Remembers to vote. So those are my 12 just kind of off the cuff thoughts about what I've utilized in the past, but I'm certainly open to ideas from the group. It's a lot of work. Educating is a lot of work. It's a full-time job for sure. And we're hoping that Plant Moran can assist us in
When did the absentee ballots go out for November?
I don't know.
Last week of September,
Last week?
usually, ish.
Yeah, if November is June, the middle of June, so that's roughly a month, about 5 weeks before the election. So I would suspect that.
When you're talking about mailing, is that a separate mailing or that was going with the absentee ballot? Like,
It would be a separate mailing, so I can't include anything, they're gonna get their absentee ballot, but I wanna time it out that they get our literature first as an educational material. Something that I've done in the past just to get people to open it, I don't know how it bless you what we would do, but sometimes I always say a bump in the envelope causes people to open things rather than just toss them. So I don't know if you include a pen or something in there, just so people open it, just to be educated. You know, people can vote how they want as long as, in my opinion, as long as they've educated themselves and they know what they're voting on.
and do we include stuff on both? Like, I know that this is for the one in August, but if we're getting people to actually open it and read it, shouldn't we have something on the sinking fund as well?
I will defer to the group, but my preference is we gotta get that. The operating, of the two, the operating millage is the most important to me. That's $22 million. I do not know bluntly how we operate a district without that. I mean, if we had to cut $22 million, that would decimate a district, in my opinion. Okay?
And we talked about this at board meeting, but I don't think it's gonna fail, but if it would, we still have time to put it on the board.
Correct. Yep.
The
So
ballot in November, right?
Yep. So in the May, you have to turn in your L49s before, which is our taxable, so we would have to adjust to that if we do it after May. So we would have August, you could turn around and do it in November, but you have to be prepared for that before the August election, because there isn't time to submit that. And then May is the next election, May 2025. After that, it gets a little sticky on how to do that, and the board would have to take a lot of action on that. But yes, you are correct, so that we wouldn't skip December of 2025. You're correct.
And the issue is really getting people to vote in August.
Correct. I think the issue is twofold: educating people, and then getting them up to vote. Because it's a beautiful summer day. You know, people forget. Yeah, and that's where the web of friends and relationships, and that's the best way to educate is educate your friends. You know.
So this is gonna be presented to the school board and the public, correct?
Correct. Next Monday? No, next Tuesday. It's the 28th. The 28th.
Okay, this is just a stylistic suggestion,
Yeah.
because it's a little confusing for me, I'm not as close to it. Maybe there's like two next steps, one for each.
Right.
Differentiate the two.
Yeah,
Okay,
just because
that's a
like
good
we're
point.
mixing a couple different
Yep.
things here.
Apples and oranges for sure.
And then the other question would be related to Colleen's question, like if because the 3 mils is a significant increase. If that were to fail, do you get another go at that?
It's the same
as well?
thing. Yep.
Okay.
So, but we don't get the August, so we're starting in November. So technically with the operating mills, you could go August, November. That's really hard because you have to submit the language prior to the August election, so it's almost like you're assuming failure because it times out. The November one, you don't have, the only next one you have is May, unless you do some different things with your taxable levy with the county, then you could go in August, November, again, and not miss the collection in December. Does that make sense?
So it would be November, if it fails, we still have the 1 mil for another year.
No, just in, you're
Yeah.
gonna collect,
You collect it
You're
in
gonna
December.
collect it.
But then
December.
you would vote again in May, theoretically.
so after the December collection,
Almost 3
we are done.
times.
Yeah.
We're done with both
Right, okay, so
operating.
it's not the last shot.
Correct, it is not the last shot.
I have a question for you. So I understand we can't use resources and stuff, but what happens if you are in a meeting with a parent and they're like, hey, what do you think of this mill? Or this fund?
If you're not acting as a board
No,
member
I
at this
mean you, like
Oh,
what
me?
happens? Yeah.
She's always
I
acting
can,
as
I'm always
Yeah, so
acting,
you're
I
not, so
can
if somebody
never,
asks you, you're not really allowed to talk about it.
I can just
Okay.
basically educate. This is what it means if we don't have it, we're gonna lose $22 million in revenue.
So you can say it in terms like
I
that.
can absolutely say that, cause that's a fact.
That's
I
fact.
basically
That's
can
fact.
say the facts.
Okay.
Just the facts, man, just the facts. Obviously, by virtue of recommending they be put on the ballot, I think people know how I feel, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have recommended that, so.
I think, Joe, that point you brought up about segregating this list, next step, sinking fund, next step operating mode, that's critical.
But give me an example of what would not be one versus
So
the
go to the
other,
first one.
okay?
Like
Oh, the
number
project
one.
identification, yeah, that's
Like
perfect.
I think that's
Absentee
such an
ballots.
important thing.
First thinking, you're absolutely right, yep, I was just looking at the next slide, the next slide, you're right, thank you, Joe. Yep, we can easily do that.
And then like the timing and the absentee.
Number 3 is the same way.
Yeah, just a couple of these things.
Absolutely, we can look at that and adjust that. Thank you, that's a really great point. So this is, obviously, that's the sinking funds, you're in two different villages. So questions in the area where you think you can assist, or things that you think we can do differently. So my next step is to present this on May 28th. I think I'm presenting it, the meeting starts at 5:30 with a closed session, then at 6:30 we go into regular meeting. And then, just so you know, we'll be recognizing our all-state athletes, and then this will come immediately after. So if you're interested in attending, if you're there by 6:30, 6:40, you'll be able to see this presentation. And obviously the presentation, just so you know, which is a little bit different, board meetings are meetings of the board held in public. They're not public meetings. So I'm not necessarily speaking to the board. I'm not necessarily speaking to the public. I'm speaking to the board. But the public is there too. This will all be on the screens like everything is, so.
I should know this, and I've heard it discussed before, what percentage of voter, like, people that are gonna go vote for this are people that have skin in the game, like kids in the school district, but like, what percentage of that is like older people that don't have kids in the school
I don't
system?
know, we can ask that, but I'm
80%-ish.
gonna maybe push back a little bit on that. I think we all have skin in the game, because how the public school goes,
So goes your
arguably, so
values.
goes your,
Yeah,
For sure, but
Right.
as somebody who was out of the public school, I had no idea what was going on with bonds and everything else, so like communicating with that
yes.
demographic is
And
tough.
to your point, it's tough when they're not in school, right? Because I can use, and I can still use that, but I am a parent, but I was a parent of young kids, and sometimes parents check out over the summer. Mail sits in mailboxes, I'm not reading with social media, I'm in a different place in August than I am in November.
Sure.
That
I mean, I
kind of
have a student at Brownell and have a hard time reading the Bronco Bulletin every week. So I'm saying this as a parent with skin in the game, with a kid in the school, to get voters who have no kids or grandkids in the school to like open a, it's hard.
Yep, and most of the aging population, I'll use my parents who don't live here, but they're the ones who want it in the mail, right? They're not my social media people, that's why we mail it to everyone, but those are the target audience for
they
mailings.
tend to be the ones who vote absentee, so that's why it's much more important to get it to them, because they get it, they go through it, I remember I got something on that, yeah, I checked that box.
Well, and speaking as one of those people,
Are you one of those people?
one of the things that you have to think about in this is that if I've got my absentee ballot in, let's say for the sinking fund, I'm getting that in September, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, I get that in September. That means I need to have a bullet point postcard delivered to me at least 10 days before I get my ballot.
They actually sent them early last time, in 22. So it came out, a week before it was supposed to come out, the absentee ballots.
Right, and so that means that if you're gonna use standard postcard rates on mail versus first class mail rates, you have to mail that 3 weeks ahead of that.
Well, we're basically at that 3 weeks time limit, because it's the middle of June, maybe 4
Yeah.
weeks, roughly 5.
So I mean,
As I said, we're a little in rush mode.
right,
Dr. Tuttle, do you anticipate any opposition to this? I mean, I don't just mean individuals, but like, remember when you weren't here for the bond, but the tech bond, there was a lot of opposition, there was all sorts of mailers. Do you anticipate there's going to be any, like, organized group of people that are going to oppose this?
I mean, it's hard for me to know. I've had campaigns that did, and I've had campaigns that don't. I don't know Grosse Pointe well enough to know. So I don't know. Someday you might have some pop up, and what we do with that is you just try to continue to educate, because typically, sometimes, if they're going to say anything, they're going to say no new taxes, and that's going to be correct. But the operating millage is no new taxes.
Right.
So hopefully nothing on that. And once we get that, I would hope, I don't know, there were several communities, and I do not quote me on this, because I don't have the list, but there were several communities in Michigan who went for operating millages this last election, and all of them passed aside from one. So this is typically something that people in Michigan realize. This is a tremendous loss to your community and to your school district, the operating villages.
And all the sinking funds passed except, I think, 2, and those 2 were communities that never had sinking funds before, so.
Were those with increases too?
Well, they had no prior sinking fund, so.
0 to 1 is an increase.
I will tell you, trustee Warden, to your point, the one thing I am concerned about, and I know you were at that same event for elected officials, several people came up to me and were saying all the things that are gonna be on the ballot in November,
Right.
like the senior citizen, the helm, I think it's called.
Right.
I think there's possibly a road, there's the Wayne County, Kansas water.
Yes.
So, we just have to really do a good job of, educating, and hopefully community members can advocate however they feel is appropriate to do so. You're welcome, Ben. Any other questions? I think you've heard enough of me, but my door is always open, my phone is always available, my email. I can't tell you that I'll respond immediately. We get a lot, but I will certainly respond if you have any questions or ideas before Monday, particularly for that education. And if you are willing to help in any capacity and you know what that is, please reach out and let Chris. Chris is kind of my collector of information for this. So if you're willing to do presentations and you know specific, like if you're part of Rotary or Kiwanis clubs or whatever, and you're willing to take this on, that would be tremendous.
Maybe one question, sorry to keep adding.
You're good.
Thinking about being an advocate, when do you think, knowing how much is going on and you have two of these things, there's going to be at least a sketch prioritization of projects with the sinking fund?
That's my biggest concern, Joe, because again, so what I'm hoping in a perfect world, and I can't say, I'm hoping that I can get Plant Moran to come in and tell them exactly what we need. I mean, there's going to be a cost associated with that. They're not going to do that for free, but we do not have the capacity in their office to run a district and a full-time job. So they have a little bit, I think Gersman has the majority of the historical, because we typically use them, and switched to Plant Moran a couple years ago, yeah. But they've done a really nice job as well. So I'm hoping they can get billboards together for us. I mean, they can do everything that on that list. They can do it all. They can do brochures. They understand it all. They do it for a lot of districts. So as far as the list is concerned, I'm hoping they can come in, and I'm going to ask them to please prioritize if this passes, what do you recommend out of that 2022 list? We do need to clean it up, so if they recommend something that's already been done, we don't have time to clean it up and do that right now. So if they recommend something and Ben says, we already did that with the bonds, we just take it off. And so we can showcase, I think it's easy to showcase what we've already done. Hopefully Plant Moran has all that. And then they make a recommendation. The board has to approve that, but they don't really approve that because you haven't done an RFP process. I mean, all the budgets associated with the parking lot now, it might be $1 million. You put an RFP out and your bids come in at 1.2. So so the board doesn't necessarily have to approve it in concept. They do need to approve it in concept, I guess. But they won't be specifically approving anything until you go through the whole RFP process, the bid process, and lowest bidder and so forth.
But there's no issue with doing the brochures, like the district paying for that?
As long as it's educational.
So we can do a brochure that shows all the projects that still need to be done, as long as we don't say, but we need your vote for
Yep,
this.
if this passes, these are the things the district plans to do with the money. Yep, it's strictly educational, yep. We can never say vote no, vote yes, basically.
Seems like a very important investment to hire someone to do that, but also, I just thinking about like the counties went around opposition, the only thing I can see is it's an increase, and if there's not specificity around what the additional money is going to, someone can say, well, this is a slush fund.
Pay for a black hole.
Yeah, whatever, so.
Yeah.
I just what can I say that four punchy things,
And,
or in your literature,
yeah.
priorities.
And I think the literature needs, for the people who want more than 4, they want to know everything, then we direct them to that document, that's how many pages?
197.
And then specifically to page X that shows per building, and then you can find your specific building. So to your point, yes, you want to be very, I always say it's kind of an oxymoron, you want to be succinct yet thorough at the same time. But Plant Moran can certainly help us with that. Operating millages are a little bit easier because the literature doesn't change, the numbers do. Sinking funds are a little bit more complex, and I think that's why the board decided November for the sinking fund, because it gave us more time to pull everything together. The operating millage really is good to go. We put the numbers in, but the information, the facts, I mean, Ann Arbor just went before Troy. I mean, honestly, we pulled all that together and my past experiences from Owasso, and then we just generated it. It's all the same, just what's unique. Sinking funds are very unique to a district. Not the uses, but how it's been used and how the district intends to use it, and the amount associated with 1 mil. Because people think 1 mil is 1 mil. Just to give you a comparison, in Owasso, 1 mil generated 500,000. Here it generates 3.4 million. So even when you see comparable communities all have the same amount of mills, that does not mean the same amount of revenue is generated from those mills.
It may save time. I don't know, I know you're very Ben, but it may save time for you to make up the initial list. Give it to Point Moran and say, hey, does this look good to you? You know, because otherwise they're going to reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
And you'll have that list in December.
And Ben can absolutely do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I'm looking at one right now.
Don't forget technology.
We
Don't forget technology.
did it.
The whiteboard, or the smartboard you broke earlier.
Yeah, but I
That's
drew on
right,
it.
yeah, see?
I started drawing your name. I was drawing it diagonally up the line,
Yeah.
the parallel line. Other questions about this? I appreciate your time. I know it's a lot. Typically you do one or the other, so to combine them both in an educational process is a lot.
If anybody has items that you see, you know, after you cogitate what we just saw tonight, please get them to me or Dr. Tuttle so we can, you know, get this. I mean, this has to be, we're going public on this very rapidly. So
Formatting issues goes to Mr. Smith.
Yeah, so, I mean, anything you can give us as far as making it clear. I mean, my whole thing, as far as my recommendation based on what we've been through before, is you have to be able to send out a 6x11 postcard with bullet points on there, 4 or 5 bullet points, here's why. And because if you get into the weeds with people, especially older folks like me, don't want to read it all, you know, and just basically you want to maintain our excellence here. We need this because we need a roof on the building. You know, you want your kids wet, you want them coming home sopping wet, you know.
It goes back to the why. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? It needs to be concluded in some capacity. I know that was pretty comprehensive, but. All right.
Okay. Next on the agenda, new business, we had Compton Law presentation.
I don't know what that was, unless that was the do's and don'ts.
Yeah,
So I
that was
remember
basically do's and don'ts, so that's really not an issue. So now we move on to public comments. Do we have any? Going once, twice?
One question, so the document that was presented was from 2022.
Mhm.
Have there been any amendments where other projects have been added or need to be prioritized?
Not that I'm.
I'll answer that. So nothing's been changed from its original draft, but we do need to remove projects that have been completed from that list.
Right.
And perhaps if we were to update that list, other projects would be added. So I think you would see some removed that might have been concluded in a bond or a sinking fund, that project that happened in 2022, 2023, 2024 would be removed. But then you can add stuff that comes up too, you know, so.
Whatever sinking fund projects happened last summer, plus the ones that'll happen this summer, have to come off that list.
Right.
Well, I don't remember the exact list, I'm sure you haven't been, but there was some work done in the front of Pierce, right?
Mhm.
And I think there was some other sidewalk work and things that were done there. I'm sure we're on the list.
Well, I'm sure like the north parking lot that's gonna be done this summer is on the list, right? So that'll be taken off.
ADA compliant stuff that was done, yeah, so.
Well, to the extent that we can, to Mrs. Felder's point is, to the extent that we can, you don't want to put that 197-page list out there as fact because it's not updated.
It is a 2022 document that represented the needs of the district in June of 2022.
Yeah, right, you have to make sure you preface it that way. It's not the list of what we have to do right
But it
now.
hasn't materially changed.
Yeah.
No,
If it's just been sinking
a
fund,
couple $1 million of
Yes.
it's been taken
It's
out.
been some
I mean,
small thing.
And if you took out 5 million, you're still at 247, so.
exactly.
We spoke with Robert about that in
What did he say?
December, or, well, we asked, like, we said, we need to get an updated list. It's a year and a half old at that point.
And there's a cost associated with that, so I
Yeah.
think they wanted to.
Well, I think a cleaner way to go is gonna be, here's what we're planning on spending the sinking fund on, you know? bam, list, get Ben's list updated, and that's what we go with. Don't add
Chris?
anything
I keep
on-
saying and Chris's every time you say that.
He's
Don't add
having,
anything for Chris.
I have
Okay.
a couple questions.
Go right ahead.
Okay, could someone tell me when the hold harmless millage is up for a vote?
That's the operating millage. It's a combined, yep, it's a portion of it. So the operating is 18 mils.
Okay,
Yep.
it's the
so it's not
tax-
separate.
it's the tax on principal residences as opposed to the tax on non-principal residents.
Okay, great.
That's the difference.
Is there a completed bond project list? I've gone on the website, it's really hard to find it. I wanna know all the things that were addressed. Is there any comprehensive list?
I agree. There's like a 2021 list, there's a 2022 list. There's no place that they all exist, but the individual projects up until this summer
Yeah.
are on there. I can forward them to you. I can forward you the links.
The links.
But it's
Okay.
not like you go to one page and like every year's completions are there. They're in different places on the website. Yes.
Did it start in 2019, since the vote was in 2018?
The first projects, to my recollection, were the summer, what were after COVID. During COVID, after COVID, there wasn't. I don't think there was any work done prior to COVID. It was the first summer of bond projects was started in
2021?
June of 2020.
Correct.
June of 2020.
Correct.
That's, okay, during COVID.
Yeah.
Probably
There was a
started
lot of
put on
planning that
hold.
was involved in 2019. So it passes in
Right.
November of 2018, then all of a sudden with 2019, you're getting, I think, owner's rep might have already been decided at some early point, obviously, but then you're getting your who's doing construction, who's doing technology, who's doing this. So
Yeah.
2019 was all that planning.
2019 was also the year of reconfiguration discussion and
Yeah.
the decision in June of 2019 and reconfiguration. And so I think that was what was happening during the discussion on the individual bond projects. The quoting process for the first round had to go out in that probably spring of 2019. The bids probably went out and in through 2019. And so, I mean, I remember when I started watching in 2019, 2020 is when, in 2020 is when the board remotely was voting on the bid packages, like we've got the bid package back and we need to vote. And that was in very late 19, early 20.
Okay, another question. Why did the board, does anyone know, why did the board break with tradition in setting the sinking fund for 10 years instead of 5 years? Because there's a trust issue in the community, and a 5-year sinking fund allows there to be some accountability to say, here are the projects. And with that bond being so kind of ambiguous because of the COVID interruption, that was a lot of money to spend in a very short amount of time. And I think many people in the community think, well, what did we get for that if we had $50 million more things? And then you look at the list and you find things like a monument, like the name of the monument marker is a critical need for $27,000. Well, to me, that doesn't sound like it's critical. Like,
What building is that at, Kelly?
pardon? On the Monteith list, it was right there, and they're on for many of the schools. There's some things like the contingency costs add up to 30.5%. That's a lot of money. Is there a way that the board and the committee can work to cut down on the contingency costs, because that's eating up a third of the money you're taking in?
Agreed.
I'll only say what I know about contingency costs, especially when you're doing underground work. You never know what you're going to find when you start digging stuff up, and so you have to have some sort of contingency for the unknown, but you don't, have to spend that amount if you don't. I'll just give you an example. We had built an auditorium back where I came from, and we found water leaking from so it cost a ton more than I had anticipated, and that was received in the bid, and so that's why bidders always want a contingency cost for those unknowns that happen. But if those unknowns don't happen, then they don't spend the money, or it can be diverted other places.
And project manager costs 10%. Is there any way to hire staff at say $200,000 a year to oversee a project instead of having 10% of all the projects being paid to Plant Moran, who devised the list? There seems to be a conflict of interest here because they find all these things like ceiling tiles and floor tiles that are critical needs. And when you walk in the buildings, they look fantastic. They're like, why would you take up this tile? Why would you take up the ceiling?
Mr. Ismail asked those questions, I remember
And new
going to the
furniture,
meetings when he was
classroom
asking
furniture.
them several years ago. I agree with you that that's why the list needs to be scrubbed.
Yeah, so you all need to do a really good job of prioritizing how you're gonna use this money, because for 10 years, it sounds like a lot of, like, I know education is separate, so this is a lot of money for all of the infrastructure. But we all say, but we're sending our kids to school to learn things. Not for new cabinets and not for new ceiling tiles and all that. Anyway, that's just my perspective.
So, there were, sorry, count. There were 10 sinking funds in May. All but 3 of them were for 10 years. I think that, I mean, my thought was the appetite is let's get it done and get some stability in what we're going to be planning for over the next 10 years, because I think that doing it at a 5-year clip is, you've probably got projects that exceed our 5-year spend plan already with what we're gonna find. It may not be 252 million, but it's probably more than 100, or more than 50 if we would have went for 5 years versus 10 years. So I think, in my opinion, you have to have a plan that can be supported by the incoming funds over that plan and not have to redo it the shorter period of time, redo it at 5 years versus redoing it 10 years. But I agree, regardless of whether it's 5 or 10, we have to sell that these are critical needs and they're not nice to haves, they're have to haves. And it's gotta be clear that we're not, I don't care about pretty, but, talk about, we need a new bathroom. Do we need a new bathroom or do we need a functional bathroom? That's kind of where I'm at with those kind of projects is, yes, we need to understand what is critical for the classroom, not necessarily
It has to
for.
be functional, we're not making it Charlton.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. The community would appreciate if you do a really good job of saying, here are my
Nail
priorities.
everything down is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think we have until probably August to do that with the sinking fund portion of what we're asking for, because it's on the November ballot, so yes, I'd rather have the detail make sense and be scrutinized than just say that 252, that is that's a number that was out there from 2 years ago, but yes, someone who, like yourself, who's gonna go through the detail and go, yeah, I would say the same thing. What do I don't need a monument, I'll get a plaque.
But since you're scrambling to get this priority list done by August, that also gives the community, like, we're doing this in 2 months for a 10-year journey. It just seems a little risky to me because I don't trust it. I don't trust, personally, I don't know what the rest of the people feel.
I agree, and to your point, it's people, especially less, and I know the bond and the sinking fund are different, but when the bond went out, they had these Post-it notes all over the schools, so you could go through and take a tour and see this needed to be fixed and that needed to be fixed, and then 2 of those buildings were closed almost immediately after it passed. So those people in Trombley and Papard, those are gonna be the people that are like, not again, like I'm not gonna do this again.
Right.
I mean, there are people that are still bent about it, so I don't know, and I do think, especially in the park with their increased millage, there's a lower appetite for another tax increase. So those are gonna be the people that oppose it, and I agree that we have to be careful. I know you guys are spread thin, if I don't know if we as the committee can help go through that list and be like, these are things that I would wanna see done, not a monument plaque, but I'm happy to look through that list and kind of make a list of each school that I as a parent would be like, okay, this should be done.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak as a community member also, though. I mean, if that list is, again, directionally accurate, right? I mean, of course, you can go through it and identify things that, you know, in your opinion, shouldn't be on there, and I probably agree with you with the monument. But if that thing is directionally accurate, and we have the buildings that we have, with the age that they have, okay, over the next 10 years, you can imagine how much more is going to be added onto that. I would sit there and say, okay, 10 years times X gets me to Y. I'm still well short of what the total cost was going to be. And I still have 10 years of adding on of age and wear and tear to the buildings. I can get there pretty quickly that, man, I'm going to support this, I'm going to support this full-heartedly, because you're probably looking at what's going to get raised here is maybe a third of what the total number is on there. To me, that's sort of the big picture, macro, right? Step away from the detail, right? And think to yourself that way and say, okay, now a third of those costs are, I was going to say a word, I'm not going to use that word. A third of those costs aren't necessary. Well then, I would be shocked. I'd be blown away, and I'd be the first one to admit I'm wrong.
Take a look at the list.
Yeah,
I mean, if you just do windows,
I will.
parking lots and roofs,
Right.
Well, those are the things, that's what I'm saying, and
that's
rather
gonna
than seeing,
cover the amount.
Right. I mean, just
And people don't, I mean, I hear so many people complain about the north parking lot. There's only so much money. And so, you know, you get what you pay for. If you don't pay for it,
but just think
you're
of
gonna
the
have
added
to
on
pay
of the 10 years,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
I think
On
you
top
start
of
with
what's
parking
already there.
lots and roofs.
And it's been 2
and
years
whatever
since
you have
then.
left, there's not gonna be much.
you know, you're not
Yeah,
gonna have any
can I,
frivolous stuff.
can I inject a little bit?
100%.
So, on, these are the things that I would be targeting, just for example, and it's not monuments or anything like that, but from the facilities director's perspective, roofs, tuck pointing is screaming up my list of a need that is a huge problem in the district, and I'm spending a lot of money to fix those issues. Windows, I've got schools with wooden windows that I can stick my finger through. I've got parking lots, storefronts, I've got schools with storefronts that are just rotted away from salt over the years. I've got fire alarm panels that we can't get parts for anymore. I've got a chiller at north that needs to be repaired. I've got a cooling tower at south that is from the 1940s that is still in operation over there. I've got a mechanical room that is in terrible shape at north. I've got at Parcells. That's operating on an old heating control system that is from the 1990s that I can't get parts for anymore. These are the things that I need help with. It's not monuments, those are the things that I don't need help with, but from a facilities director's standpoint, these are the things that I need help with.
and that's what's gonna pass
That's what's gotta be on the
this.
list.
That's gonna, the link to the other Plant Moran thing, I think there's a little distrust with Plant Moran too, so to pay them, I don't think that would be a necessary cost. I would wanna hear from you, like exactly what you just
Exactly.
went through, and pictures of that, and I guess I'm volunteering my time if I can help, because you guys are spread thin, to put something together, I will do that. I think that, and then talking to like realtors, board of realtors, people like that are doing luncheons and that kind of thing, educating them on some of these things, that's gonna get to the people we need to get to. And just forget the link to the Plant Moran thing with the monuments, because that's gonna not.
Well,
That's
I
gonna
think the
affect
Plant
most
Moran has
people
been
like
pretty
it.
important. Like I've been on facilities for 4 years, and they provided us with a pretty darn good list. I know, Ben, you've worked with them too. And I don't want to discount Plant Moran. I think they've done a lot for. I know with the Warm, Safe, Dry, Connect campaign, they were pivotal in making sure that they gave all the information to everyone. I mean, I think it's important to have community input, but I also think we need professionals to tell us what our critical needs are.
I would agree with that, but I think the professional should be Ben or someone from the district. I think that makes a difference as opposed to having just a Plant Moran being the source of truth on the list. I think it's very
That's
important.
very important.
But I mean, you work with Plant Moran, right? Aren't they?
I do, and
I'm not against them, for the record, I just think it's expensive for something that could be done.
Professionals are very expensive. So are lawyers. Or professionals are always expensive.
Well, Ben, I think you hit it on the head. Come up with your list, And I
Maybe
bet
we
you're not
could
gonna
do
find
it
any money
for you,
left.
'cause you're pretty compelling, and put you right up there. You are, I mean, you said it, what did you just spend in that list?
Yeah,
$100 million equally,
I spent a lot of money real
yearly,
fast there.
yeah.
Well, and
well,
to the
that's what you
point that
should
he's like,
focus your pitch on.
I would rather see, as a taxpayer, I would rather see a list that is like approachable, that we could get to with this sinking fund over 10 years, than a list of 300,000 of like all the wants that we might need. That's what I'm trying to say, is, and I, again, not poo-pooing Plan Moran, but instead of this like fancy, like, well, we might need this, that, and this doorknob replaced here, extrapolated to this number that people can't even wrap their mind around, of like, we need roofs, we need
So
windows, we
perhaps
need.
don't even show that document, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's my, well,
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Not to make the meeting longer or anything like that, because I know I've been here too, talking about some different types of technology pieces that are out there. If I were specifically though, but Ahmed, if I were specifically to be talking about some technology needs that you have to have, the College Board, NWEA, no matter what, you can't avoid digital testing these days. You have to have school managed devices that are out there. And those devices do expire, right? And so I think something like the sinking fund would certainly allow us to continue providing those types of school managed devices so that our schools can take those tests in a timely manner and so that you're not spreading it out over.
So we need a line item that says testing required computer equipment.
Right, and you're great at presenting, you make a really strong case, so I would say you would be a good person to educate on that.
Sure.
So I think the prioritization is very important, but we cannot hide the ball how big the problem is, or not the problem, the investment required. It's not another way in which you do it. Someone would always disagree with the consultant's report for one reason or the other, but the reality is, you can argue about the exact number, we have $250,000 of maintenance to do. And if this doesn't happen, that's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
So people need to understand what we're talking
The
about.
magnitude.
The magnitude needs to be known.
Can I say something again?
Sure.
Okay, so I heard at the board meeting something about transportation costs going up. So gasoline is up, wages are up, the buses cost more. There are middle school students that are being sent to Clawson, for example, for a track meet. Not too many years ago, our middle schools competed, Pierce against Brownell against Parcells. And that was a way we kept our costs down. And now we're sending these little children out way far and wide at the dinner hour, et cetera. That's another way to kind of trim those transportation costs, because those are not necessary.
I would disagree. My daughter's in basketball and she's in a league and she plays area schools, and to just keep playing Pearson, Brownell, you know, that would not be a good idea. I mean, we play area schools, we go the buses go at 4 o'clock, they play Lakeview, Warren, they don't go very far. I wouldn't agree with that at all.
It's just this is an idea for
Right.
if you need to trim costs, you want to ask the community for money. There are things that are possibilities for trimming costs for transportation. Before you ask for the world for it, this is what we need it for. We need it for high school.
It's for
this,
K-12
this, this.
education, the core academics.
Are we only part of whatever, MAC, red, MAC, white at the high school level, or is that following?
That's a high
Yeah,
school.
it's just high school.
High school.
Yep.
And I think the football teams travel on bus too, right? I don't think anyone's gonna ask, but the football team always play north and south together.
I didn't say high school level, and back in the day, if middle school did want to go somewhere else, parents drove. That was a parent commitment, and not a school education budget commitment.
So I think it's been a great meeting.
Thank
I
you.
think we have,
Thank you, Kelly, thanks for your
Good,
input.
good, those are just thoughts.
No, we appreciate
I'm
it.
not the only person, but those are my thoughts.
Any other committee member comments? Once, twice. Melissa, your point on the list is so important. As far as making it so people can touch and feel, and this is beyond question, has to happen, you know. Okay.
This
Dr.
is,
Tuttle, thank you for your presentation. I think that's gonna be really helpful for the community to see, just how important it is. I think that your points were really well made, and so whatever you did to make those succinct were very, very good.
Thank you, and I wanted, it was a team effort, and Chris and I worked together, he put it all together for me, so. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was, I
so-
think it had enough information, and it was short enough that, you know, I think it was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.
So we'll provide, if we have additional thoughts, we'll provide comments.
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks a lot,
awesome,
Matt.
thank you.
Joe,
Yep.
thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.